First and foremost, to the YouTube live stream community, this video will serve as commentary. I expect it to be intercepted one way or the other, as has typically been the case for a few months. The data logs for our internet service provider tell all. Anyways, that is not the main focal point of this video. This video, I am going to be talking about something that is very, very pivotal in these current times that we're enduring. So you'll probably hear this on audio mediums before you actually see it, but I digress. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. We're depending on. Damn it. Yeah, okay. Check how we're doing on memory. Morning. Jesus Christ. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on what part of the world you may be located or situated at. Now, if you've been following me for quite a while now, a few years now, you might be well aware that I tend to do journalism on the side. I have been doing for many years, underwriting mostly. And today I'd like to tell you all about a story that has taken a very weird series of events within the past, I'm going to say, since 2016. To preface it all, I have a current workers' comp case in this state of Illinois, Chicago. That is not the focal point of the video, however, I felt like it should be prefaced. Ongoing, there's a trial that's supposed to be happening, and there's a lot of inconsistencies, and furthermore, I'd like to bring attention to the fact that without their contributions, none of this would have been possible. So thank you to the IWCC. Now, my previous videos, I was delving into the political aspects of our nation and what exactly it means to be on the lookout for certain groups. And my past videos, if you look on my channel, you can tell that they're mostly entertainment related. That said, the video that I'm going to delve into today deals with some hardcore damning evidence, testimonials, and a smear campaign that has been operating since the very, very beginning of my workman's comp case. Not only that, in conjunction with hospitals, middlemen, and without further ado, I'd like to present my story to you all. Now, as you have all been aware, there is a current FOIA requests and federal departments that are not actually honoring some. I've submitted multiple within the past few years, and just very recently I was surprised, and I'd like to thank the representative who actually works down at Springfield and arguably at the federal level for actually complying with my request. And God bless. I really appreciate it. I submitted a FOIA request not too long ago in relation to the ongoing ordeals. Not my first FOIA submitted, first time they took this long, however, and I got news of another request quicker. That one is unrelated. I'll delve into that one in another video. Now, they told me that it was a 45-day extension that was requested by the division, and I was supposed to be getting these records on May 18th, 2020. However, Miss Reynolds was very, I would say, awesome. I'm truly at a loss for words. She not only honored the request, but she went above and beyond and did more than she had to. And I'm eternally grateful for that. She's the Executive Division of Legal Services, Illinois Department of Public Health, and I'd like to extend, first and foremost, my thanks, and let's jump into the video. So I recently got the FOIA request that I submitted back, and it has a lot of damning evidence, and you would not believe it. Most people would not, because, you know, we're so conditioned, especially within the status quo of our nation's mental health regulatory statutes and the way that they operate. Some would even argue that we're going back in time and we're still stuck in the 1980s centric era of treating quote-unquote mental disorders. Now, a bit of background about myself. I studied psychology and part of psychiatry, although I stopped at psychiatry because I don't agree with the totalitarian and draconian methods that are employed at various of these hospitals. From personal experience and from the various people that I've interviewed over the course of a few years back. I did an expose on a organization called WWASPS, headed by Mr. Robert Litchfield, which was incorporated back in the day, and it was a detention camp, a set of detention camps for troubled youth, and they were basically, you know, kidnapped, held for ransom. They would come get these troubled teens and ship them off to God knows where, some other part of the world where US laws don't apply, because there's like a thin line of borders, and basically if you're an American there, you're fucked. And the things that went on there were atrocious. They were egregious. Many have argued, survivors have argued, that it was a foreign-based program to attempt to condition our youth instead of treating them with dignity, respect, and as an American. They were shipped off, they were taken in the middle of the night. You know, they would get a call, and then the parents were paying for this, mind you, without knowing. So they'd be shipped off somewhere else, a different part of the world. Nobody would have a single clue what was going on, and they would be there for months. They'd put them in boxes, literally, like, you know how morgues are? They'd put them inside one of those if they would attempt to call home, if they would start to talk about their family, if they would even bring up the subject matter of why am I here. They would make them do unbearable things, and there was a lot of abuse going on. And I did an expose on a certain one called Paradise Cove. I know a few of those survivors. Some went military, some didn't, and I guess that proves that the program either worked or didn't, but that was not the exact root of it. Now, they created a network where you can actually talk to these survivors and get their actual intake, because since arguably the early 90s and when they came about, a series of class action lawsuits, and keep in mind, these people live with this trauma for life. The things they were exposed to were horrible. They made them go up and down mountains carrying useless gear. They would step on them. They'd immediately sound some type of psychological frequency, and they'd all have to drop to the ground, and they'd have to stay there in that position off the ground with their hands and arms, not doing any. It was basically like a totalitarian boot camp. The things that went on there are even worse. As far as the women are concerned, you don't even want to know half of it. It was basically, in essence, a slave trade. And the kids, teens, which are now men and women, never got the ability to call home. There were levels. You had to ascend through levels. And the way that you ascended through levels was basically being a backstabbing son of a bitch. You know? They basically made you turn on your own fellow people in those programs. They awarded what most would call snitching. They awarded what most would call, hey, that person's trying to write a letter. Hey, that person's trying to call home. Hey, that person's talking about their... They would have them get into series of events where they were rotated between depressive, manic episodes that were the result of the programming and psychological operations being conducted and done there at those remote islands. So they'd have them alternate between depressive, anger, and happiness, which the happiness bit programming only was for like a minute. And then they would be exposed to these things for hours. So they have them, this is why those people are so fucked up, because they were exposed to this type of thing. Now, to bring it all to a conclusion in regard to that aspect, the civil suits went on. The human rights violations were by far the worst you have ever seen. And basically, as far as today, there is only one operating, and even that one is under close scrutiny. Every single thing got shut down. You know, the feds went in, they raided everything, they took names, they took key people, everybody was prosecuted, and I think Robert Litchfield created a different division. However, he does not have any current stakes in those things. So, keeping all that in mind, these programs are employed by story focuses in the US. I'm American. A few years back, in relation to the FOIA requests, to the dossiers that were provided to me, in relation to all the information that I have acquired over the course of, since 2016, there has been a deliberate smear campaign against arguably my family, but mostly me. And this is not hearsay, this is not an opinion, this is all based in fact. How can I prove it? Well, the federal department and the national departments have already aided me in that. And as I mentioned, so has the IWCC. Although I don't think they were trying to help me. I think it was coincidental that that happened. However, I still feel like I need to thank them, even though they're part of the problem and you have no idea what they've done. You have no idea. This isn't conspiracy, this is damn right complacency and complicitness. So, to go back in time, the events leading to the negligent and egregious treatment and trauma suffered by myself at 22 years old, an American male, are presented in their entirety in chronological order. The story begins on Saturday, July 8th, 2017. An incident involving myself, whom to this day, thanks to the bullshit way that they ran the program at this 5025 North Paulina Methodist Hospital that overstepped human rights and civil rights, I now have PTSD. And that's never been hidden, okay? And an excess amount of anxiety. I already had anxiety prior to that, but after all that, I got to see everything that went on inside of that place. It had been about a few weeks since I was able to get prescriptions due to the insurance and financial deficits which I have to this day. And the Workers' Compensation Administration played a very complicit role. At that point in time, they were, and still are to this day, contesting medical benefits. At that time, it was a deliberate attempt, I would say, to not only prevent me from getting medication that I had been taking for years, but to cause this series of events in regard to the way they operated, denied medical coverage, and were controverting the case, all because of money. And not even because of money. A lawyer blatantly told me in my face, "It sounds like you've been played." James P. McHarrick, which is now Jones and Associates LLC. Fact. Joshua Turner. On this day, July 8th, 2017, I suffered from an adverse reaction, which was comparable to an overdose. And if you understand basic pharmacology, benzodiazepines, when you do not taper off, have very dangerous consequences and changes in mood, stability, irritability, and aggression. The nature of the incident that occurred on that day was nonviolent. However, my mother has a language barrier, and she called multiple numbers asking for help, suspecting an overdose, yet the fault does not fall on her. She was only trying to help me, and yet in doing so, arguably, in a way was complicit. But I'm not going to blame my mother, because that would be stupid. The real criminals are that hospital, Methodist Hospital, located at 5025 North Paulina, Chicago, Illinois, which has been bought out, as I've been told, by another hospital called Thoric Memorial Hospital. Subsidiaries, beneficiaries, and the logs and license codes and everything that I've acquired correlate that. This is not fact. Now, during this time, there was an attempt to get help for me because it had been a few weeks, and due to the insurance, I wasn't able to get my medication. So there were deficits that were proven to be attributed to lack of medicine, and anybody with basic common sense in psychiatry and psychology doctrine understands the way the pharmaceutical industry works. Okay, I don't think I need to explain that, but for some, I'm speaking a foreign language. So, to make a long story short, because this is very, very detailed, and when she finally called for help, it wasn't help that arrived. It was a police department. Keeping in mind, I have no criminal record, I have never been an inpatient, and I have never ever committed any type of act that is a threat to public safety, myself, or others. The incident was already settling down when the police came. And she told the 911 staff member / comm operatives that she needed help because she suspected I was overdosing / having an adverse reaction to the medication, which I had never previously had because I was taking it consistently. After that, I was taken to a very, very horrible hospital called Community First Medical Center, located at 5645 West Addison Street, Chicago, Illinois 60634. They dispatched an ambulance to my home, and the police were dispatched as well. But my mother explicitly told law enforcement that she never called for them. And this is where the language barrier occurs, and how the complicitness of law enforcement, as stated in my previous video, arguably they've been bought. During the ride in the ambulance, I asked what seemed like an officer and a staff member of the hospital why I was being taken if the incident had settled down. So did my mother and my father and my brother as well. They basically took advantage of us being minorities, mostly me. Upon arriving to the hospital, I was offered a wheelchair. Keeping in mind I have a back condition that happened as a result of a work injury. I refused and then proceeded to be taken to the emergency side of the hospital and put into a room. I informed the staff about the current situation with my then bulging herniating discs related to a work injury and how any sudden movement and position change caused pain. To this day, that is still very true, and it's exacerbated because I'm not taking anything for it. With the help of my PCP, I tapered off all pain medications. The staff must have made a note of that, but provided none of the medication that I already took to ease the pain, keeping in mind I had trouble getting medication, and I already submitted a request to Walgreens and CVS, and they gave me a complete detailed history of every single thing I've been prescribed. So, at 4:18 p.m., I was stripped down to nothing except a robe provided by the staff. At some point in time, there was a social worker, female brunette, about 5'4", 5'8", who came into the room where I was. The social worker asked me a variety of questions and gave me some papers to be signed. All the while, I was already very sedated and tired, impairing my judgment with regard to what was currently going on. At 8:39 p.m., I was feeling sedated due to not eating anything that entire day, due to my prescription medication that I had taken after finally being able to acquire it, and I called my family in an attempt to get my clothes and belongings brought to me so that I could leave. At this point in time, I was under no strict need to be there. I could have walked out, but they did some illegal things, okay? Both parties consented to audio logging and recording of the call. The call recording is available. In the audio, you can hear a very slow talking self trying to communicate what was going on to my family so that they could inform my mother, but given my current state at that time, it was audible that I was very tired, more so very sedated. In regard to the previous timestamps, now 9 p.m., 10 p.m., same date, my family talked to a woman at the front desk, and they told my brother and my mother and my father that they could go in and see me and leave me my belongings. My brother attempts to walk in through the ER entrance and is told by a doctor, nurse, staff member, still undisclosed for privacy, that he could not go in. This was in the eyes of any reasonable individual discriminatory, because when my family walked in from the other side of the room, they were never told they could not, should not, and would not enter. They then told my family they could not bring me any items, but only collect my items. Between the hours of 9:30 to 10 p.m., they attempted to bring me my clothes once more, specifically my underwear, Crocs, sweater, and shorts. A woman kept walking in and out of my room at that hospital, and told me that my family that they were not allowed to walk in due to visiting hour limitations. Keeping in mind it was 9:30. Knowing very well there was none, they made my brother Beach and my mother, they were checked for contraband, knowing damn well there was no contraband on them. That's what really pisses me off, okay? This was discrimination, not only against myself, against my brother, my mother, and my family as a whole. At 9:42, I tried calling home and was already very sedated after they had injected me with another benzodiazepine in liquid form. And you know what it says? I would never know what it is, but after acquiring the records, who knows if they're telling the truth. What I do know is that they injected me with something I had never had, and in clinical studies it has shown to have a temporary, for most, in my case temporary, and some people permanent complications. This is a drug called Haldol, which is only given to individuals that exhibit certain types of behaviors. Keeping in mind psychiatry, symptoms do not equate diagnoses. Only if you're brand new to this system would you act in an erratic manner and prescribe something so carelessly. I already had benzodiazepines in my body. Why would they inject even more and then mix Haldol on an empty stomach? It makes no fucking sense. And that's just overstepping basic medical laws. At 9:42, I tried calling home again and was already very sedated and had no idea what was going on, but slurred something about being taken to a different hospital. Unbeknownst to me, I was going to be taken into a psychiatric ward. So they planned this, okay? This was no coincidence. Keep in mind, being at a hospital does not mean you have to stay at the hospital. I want to make that very clear, especially when there's no criminal record and no history. But they sedated me so that I would comply with it. And it gets even worse. It gets worse. Call recording and logs are available for this as well. At some point in time, between 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., I was injected with something which was presumably a sedative or some illicit drug. Given the situation and why I was at the hospital, it made no sense to give a sedative to someone who was taking sedatives on an empty stomach on that particular day and had trouble acquiring said medication due to workers' comp controverting the case. My phone was confiscated much later. Coincidentally, yeah, so I could not communicate with my family and they took advantage of me in that sedated state, okay? First and foremost. Between 10 p.m. to 11 p.m., my family were waiting in the waiting room trying to get information on my status and what was going on. They were in the waiting room and there were other individuals present as well. Other individuals which were acting in a very belligerent, elevated manner, which staff could not control. One example is a disgruntled man who dropped his phone and was yelling, being verbally abusive. Now I ask you, that man wasn't even being paid attention to, but apparently the guy like me who was already sedated was top priority at that point in time? Come on now. That's conspiracy to undermine the law. I'm not going to go any further than that. A police officer stated to my family they were not allowed to go into that room because I was quote-unquote mad, which was a lie. They took advantage of me being sedated in order to spin whatever narrative. Keep in mind, my family was not being allowed to see where I was, and they kept telling them back and forth. Once I acquired every single record of every person working that day, it really pissed me off. The hospital staff treated me in a very discriminatory fashion and like a criminal. One of the hospital staff, which is supposed to be a quote-unquote professional, decided to act very unprofessional and stated that I was being sarcastic. Male, blonde hair, black glasses, wore hair in a ponytail fashion, blue hospital uniform, possible nurse, CNA, no name obtained at that point in time. Later on, I found out his name, which I will not provide right now. The way the family was dealt with felt very discriminatory and purposely kept in worry without disclosing the details in full about what was going on. At about 11 p.m. when the family was attempting to find out more information and leave and call counsel, they were given information about where I had been taken. It was a piece of paper with a phone number and the name of the hospital that I was going to be taken to. This is where the story gets the worst you could imagine. I was taken to Methodist Hospital of Chicago and placed in a psychiatric ward where I was able to see the types of things that go on in such places and the living conditions of the people there. This is also where I suffered various traumas, both physical, mental, psychological, and others. Between the hours of 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. and the following day on Monday, 7/10/17, between the hours of 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. The questions the family members have are, why was Anthony transferred to a psychiatric ward where he was placed among schizophrenic psychopaths and people with mental defect? If this was a first incident, and arguably not even an incident, I have no prior history of acting violent or out, and the nature of this incident was non-violent. Who authorized the transfer? We now know who. If it was indeed myself, how could I have chosen anything if I was not in my right state of mind due to the sedatives that they drugged me with. That is a clear ethics breach. First and foremost, that is a clear ethics breach and breach of hospital practices. I didn't sign anything. I don't remember signing anything at Community First Medical Center where I agreed to be taken to a psychiatric ward. I was sedated already from the pills without any food and was sedated once more with something in a syringe. I was never briefed on what was happening or what type of hospital I was going to. The circumstances were so severe that I do not recall the entirety of the events. However, that is where federal agencies and other national agencies, family members, friends have helped me. Initially, upon being brought in to Methodist Hospital of Chicago, 5025 North Paulina Street, sometime from, I would say 11:45 to 1 a.m. and I have the logs. It shows exactly what they were signing, but they were not communicating it to my family. They were just communicating. So that's conspiracy, okay? I spoke to an Asian woman upon being brought in. I vaguely recall what she and I spoke about, but I do remember myself being very sedated to the point of confusion, and she handed me paperwork to sign. What healthcare professional gets an individual clearly not in his right state of mind at the time due to contraindicative medication that also interfered with my pills that I was taking at that time to sign paperwork? You do not ask a drunk person. Arguably, I guess that's why law enforcement catches other people who are under the influence, right? Because they make them sign something when they're out of their element. So, continued, and signed consent forms in my drug state of mind. Then I remember I was taken to a room and the door was left open and I fell asleep, keeping in mind I had not eaten anything the entire day. I had no idea what kind of hospital this was and later learned it was a psych ward where they perform strip searches on every individual. During the search portion of the entry into the hospital, I remember an Asian man named Leo was the one who had left that door unlocked on admittance day. During the early hours, there was assault and various other forms, both battery and other types. They took advantage at me at a weak point in time where I was sedated and clearly thought nobody would hold them accountable. This is all backed up by the FOIA request, which once again, thank you, Lisa Reynolds. In my original report, I was placed in a room number 555, with an alcoholic, a schizophrenic, and this motherfucker started talking about a bunch of shit that related to abuse and rape. He mentioned how he was introduced to quote-unquote Illuminati gay shit. The guy was clearly out of his fucking element. He said he was a victim of MK Ultra. For backstory, MK Ultra / Artichoke is a covert government op, now declassified, carried out at psychiatric hospitals beginning in the 1950s with the intent of torture techniques to be used to acquire intel against foreign agents, testing these techniques against American citizens under false pretenses such as help. Notables in the experiment include Ewan Cameron, Dr. Aquino, Dr. Delgado, and high-ranking military officers now deceased. Supposedly stopped and does not happen anymore. There are many lawsuits that have risen and continue to rise related to this matter. As I prefaced earlier, things have not improved since the 1980s. They've only gotten worse. This certain individual, David Ray, 22, stated he was a quote-unquote sex slave. On Monday, he mentioned that he could, quote-unquote, not get it up. I seem to, at some point in time, I seem to get weird bumps, cuts, wounds on my hands as well as discoloration of the skin. I did not have this skin issue when I was admitted, and it is at that point in time was afraid it was a result of an STI or STD. Bacterial infection due to the lack of sanitary compliances at that hospital are also evident. When I reported this on Monday at about 11 p.m., I was not allowed to call anyone or talk about what had happened. I was in severe distress, and all the staff members would do is offer me Ambien 10 milligram to quote-unquote sleep it off. Sleep off my pain. Sleep off my trauma. The failed attempt to treat the situation as if it was real, and even recall them snickering and laughing as if nothing had happened at all. Eventually I was relocated to another room, which the staff called the quiet room. That room had fecal matter, urine smell, and was in complete disarray. But given what I had suffered, the cleanliness issue was nothing compared to the trauma that I saw, underwent, and witnessed. I did not sleep at all. 12 agonizing hours. Treated like a joke, and never allowed to call authorities, which they seldom wouldn't help. They're the main reason I was at that place. It seemed none of the working staff members would care to help, and that hurt deeply. You'd think they'd help those in need, but they don't. Drugging someone to have no correct collection of what, when, and how is not help. I saw this happen to multiple patients there, whom were given experimental drugs, abused, and even worse. The story only gets worse. When I requested medical attention and kits, forensics analysts, and such, the staff members decided not to do anything. Monday, 11:32 p.m., 7/10/2017. But what about the main hospital? The staff's decision was based on the fact that I had already showered multiple times, said it would be a waste and not helpful. Do you see the pattern going on at this facility? When I kept persisting, they finally said they would order blood tests in the morning. They did eventually. Afternoon the following day, 7/11/2017. Prior to these tests, I had been up all night. I was able to see nurses and workers coming to collect blood samples. I was wondering why. I asked them to, and they said no. But yet, they were behind the scenes, collecting the blood sample of every single individual after I had asked, except mine. That is a damning recollection of physical and actual events that happened. How weird, right? How coincidental. Collect everyone's blood except mine. Nice. I asked multiple times, and every staff member told me they were never ordered. Finally, I was told that they had actually been ordered. The staff members working at the time reported the incident, saw the emotional distress. I was never offered any legitimate help except for coincidentally by multiple of the orderlies. They failed to offer any type of support with how to cope on what had happened, and they had this smirk on their face. Oh, who's smiling now? You thought you could ruin my life? I'd like to point out a key individual, a psychiatrist by the name of Jody Reed, and many other staff members, directly and indirectly. As soon as I got there, after dealing with all this shit, they told me I had to, quote, had to take medicine or I would be there for weeks. They chose the wrong guy. You know why? No fucking hospital without a history would ever push that bullshit. None. And if they do, well, the FOIA requests show it all. And I haven't even gotten to the requests. Notice they said weeks, not days or hours. Weeks. Forcing medication on anyone is downright criminal, and I do not need any of these medications, so why would I openly and readily take a pill that would, in my case with regards to my back pain, medications, and history, kill me? Medicine that you may not need, medicine that is experimental, medicine that does more harm than good, if it really helps, and it can be argued that the same staff member should take their own advice and take that medication themselves. I want to see them do it. If it's so safe, why don't you guys take it for clinical trials, right? Help science while you're at it. I talked to my primary care provider after getting out. I was taking a bunch of other pills. The Jody Reed motherfucker apparently was trying to, and the hospital was trying to force haloperidol and Depakote on the precautions of the medication, both of them, which I read in their entirety. It even states not to mix it with those medications I was taking for my back. Why would I take something I had never taken before or needed before? It doesn't make any logical sense except to serve their own agenda. Which, as I mentioned, they had one. After the staff had observed me more and knew I was a college student, they did not prior. They were very quick to go back on their word of keeping you there if you do not take your medications. They now said, oh, now we won't keep you any longer. You don't have to take them. This was a completely different tone and way of speaking that the staff previously lacked. They started saying that by not taking medication they would keep me there longer, contradicting their earlier statements. I was in pain and suffering and they treated the situation like a joke. The facility is fucking trash and should be shut down. What goes on, went on, or will go on in this facility and others nationwide is a serious matter that needs to be brought to the attention of the people to know. These actions and practices will dictate the lives of many 10, 20, 30 years from now. If we do not change this outdated system, there is no hope for the psychiatric industry. I filed a report with the Illinois Department of Public Health, which they honored. I also filed a federal report, a police report, and other reports that I will not delve into due to confidentiality clauses. Now, I would like to switch gears and bring into question and bring into the expose the FOIA requests in their entirety. No censors, everything. I will not hold back. I am not doing this for myself. I'm doing this for everybody at that hospital. Everyone in this nation that is drugged, sedated, abused, and treated as a type of individual that has problems without even having the history, just wanting to collect a paycheck, shaking hands with the pharmaceutical industry, and wow, let's create a profitable business. Once more, I'd like to address the fact that the Workers' Compensation Commission had a deliberate hand in this. And I'm not going to discuss that on video, but I can't prove it, back it up. So, the response. Please find attached the department's response to your recent Freedom of Information request for all records pertaining to Methodist Hospital of Chicago dating back years. Not just 2017. This hospital has a horrible track record. Anybody with a single fucking brain cell can see that. I was on the inside, so I got to see firsthand the types of things that go on there. They push pills, they give people permanent conditions, and they break them down as best as they can. I guess some things never change in the leading branch of psychiatry. The FOIA requests not only showed every single incident in their entirety, but they made very clear that since the early decades, there had been multiple issues similar to what I endured. Not only that, OSHA non-compliance, total disregard for safety, and I have so many files here that I've already provided them to the appropriate parties, as they have to me. Not one single year has that hospital met actual compliances, city regulations, and what is appropriate for these types of settings and psychiatric wards. And that's not a lie. I don't care if people sue me for that. That's going based off fact, okay? And what I went through. What others went through. Every year, they had something wrong. Every fucking month, they had a patient complain. Female, male, it does not matter. They were basically subjected to what that one person basically said, MK Ultra experiments, Project Artichoke, programming. That's a very heinous act. Deliberate at that. And nobody will stand for it. I'm not going to delve into every single thing pertinent to this and the FOIA, but I can assure you one fucking thing. Not one thing has changed, and on a public perspective, the hospital's all good. Behind the scenes, you do some, what I do, as an advocate for human and civil rights, you find the damning truth. And you figure out exactly what the types of operations that they're running. I was studying psychology, as I prefaced. I stopped. I still study it. I now study psychological operations. But I do not study psychiatry. There's no future in that. That's a profitable business. They create this question of disease and they get together and they vote. Is this a disease? All in favor? Say aye. Actual medical professionals that detail in their entirety the 3-hour oaths that they have to undergo and how they basically sell out. That'll come at a later date. Factual professionals that only do it for a paycheck. That's it. They don't do it intentionally to hurt people, but at the same time, after they've been in that business for so long, they don't care about the people. So, as patients, as Americans, as civilians, we're supposed to keep it 100% with them, but they're not keeping it 100% with us. You see where the disparity is. You see why nobody trusts these programs at all. Why there is so much bullshit going on. And furthermore, what ends up happening after the fact is just asinine, dumb, total disregard for laws, and to this day, it is the worst experience. And guess what? It does not end there. There's still so little we know overall. So little. There's more requests being submitted. There's more people working around the clock to ensure that these things actually get processed and the hospital shut down. because transferring your business license and having a subsidiary buy it from you does not change anything at all. You could spray paint, I'm not good at analogies, but you could spray paint a bullshit car and it's still a bullshit car. You could cover up a graffiti decaying wall and it's still a fucking graffiti covered wall. You could scrutinize an individual, but at base they are still an individual, which leads me to my next point. A video that I uploaded where I discussed the dangers of a certain religious sect was not taken very well, especially when safety matters were concerned. So most people believe in coincidences, others simply things happen, okay? My life has been a literal movie, and that's putting it lightly. I've been through so much, and guess what? I'm still gonna go through so much. Because I'm American. Because I'm not a quitter. Because I understand it. Because I'm not a son of a bitch who turns his back on his people, community, and nation. I'm not a sellout, neither am I any type of person that condones illegal activity where businesses are concerned. You know, as minorities we're picked on so much, but it's only because they paint us into something we're not. It's all perspective, okay? A Hispanic, a black, Asian, whatever, they're going to be treated differently, arguably, than a white person. And sometimes it's even for the white person, they've also been through the same things. But I'm just saying, as a fact, minorities are always treated way, way different. So, the following point that I'd like to address is how, in addition to everything I've been through, and I can prove my mental status, my mental cognition, and who I am, none of it is in any way, shape, or form what they attempted to do. Smear. It's downright horrible. Very horrible. And this is where things get interesting, and I do not care what anybody thinks. I don't care if they do not even accept it, but here's a bare bone fact. I uploaded media a few days where I took a stand against a religious sect, as I said, and once I expressed safety concerns, I had a literal person from that hospital, Thoric, coincidentally, tell me that they would quote unquote put me down. When I informed the president of that hospital, Novak, he took it very lightly. I didn't. They swung at me, they literally physically assaulted me. But they knew that if I did that, even if it was self-defense, they were going to have a case. So I let them hit me. I let them take their worst shot. Because it only proves my point that they are complicit in aiding all this shit that's been happening. And that's not an opinion, that's fact. When I posted that online publicly, I was attacked by many people. There's a man called Hussein Ibish at Ibish Blog senior resident scholar at the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington, weekly columnist for Bopinion and the National UAE. A quick rundown of his timeline shows that he does neither support our current president, Donald Trump, or the MAGA movement. That's neither here nor there. However, my video that I uploaded took a very firm stance in MAGA. I'm American. I don't care if I get called, like, going back on what I said, these people at that institution are different than how the hierarchy and dichotomies are outside of things. This man has the audacity to attack me and defamate me online just because I said something about his faith. He said, "Have you ever been diagnosed and treated for your mental illness?" And 75 likes within the span of an hour. Mostly bot accounts, fake accounts, and IT services running these accounts because they were created not too long ago, had no likes, no following, used weird letters with a bunch of numbers, and you could tell obviously anyone that has half a brain can understand when these types of tactics are being employed. I told him straight up. I said, engage in further defamation of my character at your own leisure. I asked him if he was a medical professional of sorts. If so, I did not know that he or anyone could diagnose someone they've never met or have any information on online. He then proceeds to put which I believe he has a business connection to, skylandtrail.org. Treatment for whatever the hell he believes is the problem. That's bullshit. So I told him straight up, kindly take your own advice. I feel that you have been watching too much foreign media, that it has clouded your ability to comprehend things. I studied psychology too, so what are you getting at, sir? He then replies, they work with clients to find strategies to successfully address the quote-unquote hallucinations, delusions, and unclear thinking that are associated with mental disorders such as schizophrenia. Equally important, they help clients develop skills they need to feel safe and healthy in the world. Bitch, nobody feels unsafe. I was threatened, and that's something I live with day to day. I already had PTSD. But for you to come at me and jeopardize my personal character, my values, and who I am without knowing a single fucking thing about me, pissed me off. Nobody has hallucinations, delusions, and unclear thinking. This is all backed up factually, okay? So go fuck yourself. And then I told him, so you're telling me that when half the world is staying inside during coronavirus, those are quote-unquote paranoid individuals? No further comments. I also told him I suggest you use that, since clearly the site he recommended have no concept of what you are referencing. I asked him if he was quoting from the DSM or paraphrasing his own ideology. Guess which one it was. The APA in America has strict regulations and guidelines. And one more thing, doctor, professor, whatever you may be, just wondering, during COVID, are you out and about, or are you quote-unquote paranoid and staying inside? He did not reply, but he did successfully defamate my character online, having no idea who I am, what I do, and where I'm based. I'm never going to be able to change the opinions of some people, but it is clear that I have an upcoming lawsuit, and I don't care who it is. The attack and belligerent nature on the attack of my character, myself, who I am, is uncalled for. His name is Hussein Ibish at IBISHBLOG on Twitter. That was not the only attempt to smear me. as stated, the Workers' Compensation Commission, and as stated, I have all of this documented, and thank God for federal departments that actually help. So if I hear anybody ever questioning me and what it is I am, I'm either going to do one of two things. Three things. I'm either going to report you, I'm going to sue you, and I'm going to contact the applicable authorities, and I'm not going to contact law enforcement because they've been no help. They've only been complicit, and the records show that. Defamation, libel, and slander are never permissible. And when you have a guy that's obviously a big shot in Washington doing this, you can only question his motives, reasoning, and why he did such a thing. Keeping in mind, this was all because I publicly shared the fact that my family and myself have been under surveillance by foreign entities, and I don't want to hear any bullshit because it has all been factually backed up. I have no reason to lie, I have no reason to say, and I have no reason to act like a bitch. This is America. And with all that said, I have a lot more that I could say, but I'm not going to because I've already said it to the applicable parties and agencies. I'd like to remind you all that even during these difficult times, whether you think COVID is a psyop or it's a legitimate thing, these types of smear campaigns are usually employed and done in a covert manner and with an overt function, simply to defame somebody for no other reason than to serve their own agenda. I am speaking to another counsel. The counsel that I currently have for my workers' comp case is not helping. When I informed them of certain situations involving the things I've detailed here, they were apparently unable to help. But they were so interested, and to this day are very interested in those records, yet they're not going to get them. And if they do, pursuant to 42 CFR, I will counter-sue, because that's outrageous. That has nothing to do with the work injury at all. They're just trying to deter the case, and arguably right now they've been stalling it. I've had no money for about since December 2016, arguably January 2017. That's not a lie. And I have physical limitations, so I don't know what kind of game they have. I don't know what type of angle they're running. In fact, I do. It's called extortion, defamation, and the complete disregard and undermining of our American laws, statutes, principles, and nation overall. With everything said and done, I just wanted to bring this to the attention of everyone, so everyone knows exactly what is going on, has been happening. And make no mistake, I am going to be taking legal action. I hope you all have a good night, good evening, good morning, depending on what part of the world you're located at. This is my story. My name is Anthony. I reside in Chicago, Illinois. And there are smear campaigns being run against me, my family, and our nation as a whole. God bless, and never, ever surrender your right to the freedom of speech, press, assembly, etc. et al. Thank you. Viewers on YouTube, because I was doing this across a variety of mediums. For those that are on YouTube, thank you for your continued support. To the people that I know personally, victims, neighbors, friends, associates, business partners, federal departments, national interests, etc. et al. The fight does not stop. And this isn't anything related to COVID, because quite frankly, COVID is at the bottom of what I've been dealing with, and is not even comparable to the things that I've endured, gone through, and have witnessed. To the supporters, thank you. To everyone else, fuck off. Go to hell.